A big week ahead for a big part of Nebraska's offense. We're talking football next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel customers can get $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins.
All right. Welcome, everybody. It's Tuesday on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Connor Happer here from 1620 The Zone. Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. It is NCAA tournament week for baseball fans. Of course, we'll talk about where the Huskers ended up coming up during this show. But yes, as you said, Mitch, we do have some football for you. It's perfect offseason fodder because we're wondering about Dylan Raiola and him making his jump into year two and the things and the boxes he's checking along the way. Well, it turns out he's doing things that starting quarterbacks like really in the NFL do, which is gather up all of his primary pass catchers and fly them to wherever where is this again? Where are we at?
In Texas.
Fly him to Texas.
North Texas. You can get a little more specific to say that. So Dylan's quarterback coach, Jeff Christensen, has training facilities that he uses in North Texas, and they'll headquarter themselves there for the next 4 or 5 days.
So he's flying a few receivers and a few tight ends down to one of those facilities, and he's saying, all right, everybody, I want to put in this extra work. And I know it's time out of your lives and money for you, but no, I'm going to pay for it all. So you come down and you be my receivers for a couple days, and we're all going to bond and we're all going to live in the same house together. This is what these are the lengths that Dylan Raiola has now gone to ensure that they do take this jump next year.
How much would Nebraska fans love to see like a reality show of these 4 or 5 days? So Dylan and what would be perceived as his top 3 receivers, apparently by Dylan too, Dane Keene, Isaiah Hunter, and Ja'Cory Barney, plus tight ends Luke Lindenmeyer and Heinrich Harburg. I do not know that to be a complete list. Those are the names that I was made aware of. It could be a complete list. It seems like that would be the group or a major part of the group that Dylan Raiola would take, and that those people are in fact going with him. How much would Nebraska fans love to see like a behind the scenes of that, like in the Airbnb, getting up, what are they eating? How are they fueling? What's their morning look like? Wednesday, tomorrow is when this all starts. So today, I think, is a travel day for all of the guys to get to North Texas from wherever they're at right now, if it's Georgia or Nebraska or California. Hard to say. Ja'Cory Barney could be in Florida, but maybe some of these guys are coming from Lincoln. Today's a day to get down there, and then they start work tomorrow through Sunday. Monday, June 2nd. It's June 2nd already on Monday. That's the start in Lincoln. That's when Nebraska players are back. In fact, I would expect they'll have a team meeting on Sunday, June 1st. So that's the end. Sunday being the end of this passing work in Texas is probably also a travel day back to Lincoln. And you get there in time to see Matt Rule and Dana Holgorsen. A year ago, Dylan Raiola did this too. It should be noted. I feel like it's different this year. I feel like a year ago where the receivers like Isaiah Nayor and Jamal Banks and others may have looked at this as like, wow, this kid wants to take us to Texas for a few days. We're going to go have a good time, like get some football in too. But this is cool. Who is this, 19-year-old who wants to do this? Now, I don't think that like listening to Isaiah Hunter talk about Dylan Raiola in the spring.
Yeah.
I don't think he's looking at this as like a little vacation.
Yeah, no, I think it's a very different dynamic, and I'm glad you brought that up because I always thought, and this is just natural, right? Going into last year, you have a couple of experienced college football players that Nebraska brought in, who were expected to kind of provide some stabilization in that room that they haven't had. We're talking about Banks and Nair, but Banks in particular, right? He was the old guy with a lot of production underneath his belt, and I think that was supposed to sort of help Dylan along a little bit. Obviously, Dylan wants to come in and do the work and all those things, but it was sort of them leading Dylan. Now it's now it's the other way. I mean, definitively, it's the other way. Like even so much so that I guess I don't know about Key yet, but what you said about Hunter and what he said at the press conference, a month or so ago, really stood out. These guys have reverence for Dylan, I think, right? Like, as a leader of the team and as a guy who's done it a little bit before and is going to, is telling people, hey, we're gonna do this and we're gonna put the extra work in. So, and then the relationship between Dylan Raiola and Heinrich Harburg is, always been really, really good as well.
And that's important, I think, because I think Heinrich is viewed by players on the team as the ultimate team player. Came from the former regime, and he would be Lindenmeyer. Lindenmeyer also was a part of the Scott Frost era. But as far as players who were prominent in the former staff, and then making the transition over to Matt Rule's staff, like Heinrich is viewed as, excuse me, somebody within the locker room who, he's put in the time. Like he is the ultimate Nebraska player, I think, at least on the offensive side. And to have him experience the relationship and put out front for the rest of the team, the relationship that he has with Dylan and that Dylan has with him, in spite of the fact that Heinrich was a returning starter at quarterback last year and Dylan beat him out. And here they are a year later with this kind of a connection. That to me says a lot about the two of them. And it also speaks, I think, to something that's going on within the team culture on the offensive side, probably team wide, but more specific to this conversation. This is all about offense this week and what these guys are doing in Texas.
Well,
I imagine Dana Holgerson is pleased with this.
No doubt about it. Like, I mean, I'm just thinking about the dynamics. So you mentioned the TV show. Like, yeah, I mean, first of all, there's going to probably be content, I guess, that comes from this would be my guess. But
yeah, Instagram, sure. Yeah.
The other thing is, you go on the road. Obviously, you spend all the time with these people, basically 365 days a year with your pass catchers, specifically if you're a quarterback. But there's always, like, if you're in a team environment, there's 100+ people there, and there's places where you could go, and it's just different. Getting away, going on the road, and living in the same house together for a week. That's different deal. You get to really know each other on a more personal level and get to see how people sort of respond and react in different situations and create little inside jokes and whatever it is. Like, as weird as that might sound and as kid-like as that might sound, that's a really big deal I mean, what do we always talk about in college football? Like how these guys are all in it for the money and everything like that. We're talking about real personal connection here. Which is led by Dylan, which is really cool.
Yeah. And you bring up Key as well. Key's kind of the 2025 version of Jamal Banks or Isaiah Nair, the experienced receiver who comes in from, in this case, an SEC program. Banks came from Wake Forest. Nair came from Texas. So power conference programs. I think that Key, he didn't express it in the same way that Isaiah Hunter did in the spring. What did Isaiah Hunter say? If there was one person who would come to his wedding, it was going to be Dylan Raiola. Yeah. Dang, he didn't say that, but he talked to the media a couple of times in the spring, and then also at the Husker games on April 26th. And it's the same kind of thing, like just in the way that he expresses it, the way that he looks at Dylan Raiola. I mean, Dylan Raiola was a big part of the reason that Dane Key came to Nebraska. Yep. You can't necessarily say that. You cannot say that at all about the receivers that Nebraska got out of the portal a year ago. They were just looking for a fresh start, a new landing spot. Jamal Banks wanted to do something different to enhance his opportunity to get a shot at the NFL. Isaiah Nair had been through injuries and 2 years on the bench at Texas. Key and Hunter, they wanted to play with Dylan Raiola. It's a big part of the reason that they ended up in Lincoln.
I'm sure the presence of Dylan, like given his recruiting profile, helped a little bit. It was an added bonus maybe for Jamal
with
Banks.
The other guys. It was such a right. I don't want to discount that. It was such a quick turnaround though. Dylan committed to Nebraska and in a short period of time in December of 2023, and that's right when Nair and Banks came on. So was there communication? Okay, sure. Incoming true freshman. A kid who should still be finishing his second half of the senior year of high school. It's not the same in luring transfer portal experienced receivers as it is when he's been a starting quarterback for 13 games in the Big Ten or 12 games in the Big Ten at the time that it was when Nebraska got Hunter and Key to come on board. And then Barney, those two have the connection from a year of playing together in the system, came in together, grew up together in a sense last year. And Ja'Cory's trying to take his game this year to a different level where he's not just the dangerous back who can run the sweeps and the short passes and, run a reverse here. Like he wants to be able to get behind defensive backs. He has the speed to do it. And I'm sure it's something that he and Dylan are working on.
Yeah, this is the kind of stuff you want to see. So this is a good box on the offseason checked here by Dylan Raiola. And then, like you said, a week now and they're back in a more team environment. Like I mean, they're going to do some football stuff in a week or 2 weeks here in Lincoln. So the college football offseason doesn't last very long, but it seems like Dylan Raiola is making the most of it with his pass catchers. Let's take a quick break. We'll talk about where Nebraska baseball ended up in the NCAA tournament and their chances to make it out of this weekend. Coming up next. But first, a word from our friends at the FanDuel Sportsbook, where the NBA playoffs are in full swing, and
yes, they are.
Feels like every night we have a close game, and we don't know how those last couple minutes are going to end up. It's unless the Thunder are in them, and then they will be fouling up 3 with too much time left in the game. So we need you to get in on the action. That's of course with the FanDuel Sportsbook, both before the game tips off and live during the game. So you can take advantage of little hunches that you might have while the game is actually going on. It's never too late to get in on the action. Live prop bets, same game parlays, and then of course just the regular old spreads and over-unders. You can get on that whichever way you please. And to incentivize, how about $200 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet hits? Once again, sign up with FanDuel Sportsbook, hit that first $5 bet, and be rewarded immediately with $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Okay, welcome back on this Tuesday episode of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Thanks for joining us. Mitch Sherman, Connor Happer with you as always, finishing up some football talk, and we'll get to Nebraska baseball here in a second. But I wanted to mention one of the other players on this trip. We've talked about the 3 receivers. We talked about the importance of having Heinrich Harburg there. Luke Lindenmeyer is a player who just continues to put himself in positions to do big things for Nebraska and with Dylan Raiola in 2025. Probably the most reliable tight end on the roster. We hear a lot about Carter Nelson, who's the hybrid tight end wide receiver, maybe making more of the move to tight end this year in his second season in the program. We hear a lot, of course, about Heinrich Harburg because he started 8 games at quarterback in 2023. We don't hear as much about Lindenmeyer, and I'm going to say that he'll probably play the most reps of all of the tight ends. He's been in Florida working on his speed here in this break that Nebraska's had since the end of spring practice and kind of leading up to what comes next week when the Huskers report back for summer, and has gone under 4.8 seconds on his 40-yard dash. So he's, I think, a multi-threat tight end in Nebraska's offense this year. He looked at maybe as a player in the past who was better served on the field when the Huskers were going to run the ball. I
Mhm.
don't know that that's necessarily the case anymore. I think he can be a key part of their passing offense.
I think so too. And there's a wide open space for him to do that as well with all the production that Nebraska's lost over since last offseason. So absolutely, it's a wide open room, and I do think it seems like he has the leg up on everybody right now. Just from a leadership standpoint, obviously, but from a playing standpoint, I do think that's also the case.
Okay, so on Monday, Nebraska baseball learned its fate in the NCAA tournament. The Huskers are headed to Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Connor, a place that
Chapel Hill.
It is Chapel Hill. I wonder, will Bill we haven't talked about Jordan Hudson on this podcast. It's never been, the name has never been mentioned. Will the first couple of Chapel Hill, North Carolina be in attendance at the baseball regional? I mean, Bill should come out and support the Heels, right? The baseball Heels.
The Diamond Heels. I maybe, I don't know what he's up to.
Heels.
Maybe Jordan has a pageant that weekend. I don't know.
They're up in Maine.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is a place that you and I think a lot of people would have loved to have visited for an NCAA regional.
Yeah, I would have. I've been to this park. I haven't seen a game here, but
you have.
Yeah, it's North Carolina is a lovely campus. I really
never been there. I've never been there.
Yeah, cool place. And a nice, good, nice college baseball stadium. And so I think Nebraska will really, really, really enjoy their time, and it'll be a first class deal. They are not inexperienced at hosting events like this, regionals and super regionals, right, and things like that. But you got to get through a really tough opponent first. Nebraska got matched up with Oklahoma, a team that was in the College World Series a couple of years ago and is now in the SEC, and they're as talented as they ever have been. And they always find a way to that Oklahoma baseball is a professional operation, right? They're not much of a college baseball feel to them.
Okay.
And that sounds like, I don't know what that sounds like. I mean it to be a compliment. Skip Johnson runs them like a sort of professional organization. So they'll have their hands full with the way that they approach things.
I think Oklahoma in the Big 12 after Texas came in, and Oklahoma State has a long history of being a good program. I think Oklahoma had to do something a little bit different. And I like what you're saying. I haven't made that observation about the Sooners in the past, but Skip Johnson is the former pitching coach from Texas under Augie Garrido. And he was hired to do something different with Oklahoma, like make them stand out. And they have in his time with the Sooners. This year,
did you know, Mitch, that Oklahoma once had a commitment from our dear baby boy, Bobby Witt Jr.?
Yeah, I did know that. I did know that. What would he have been like in a college baseball stadium, college baseball uniform?
It would have worked out well for them, I think. Yeah.
Would he have hit 500?
Yeah, maybe.
I think so. I mean, they put him against Big 12 pitching. Yeah.
Yeah.
He would have bring Bobby Witt Jr. to the College World Series, like in an alternate reality, have him here in like 2022 and 2023 and watch him hit balls onto 10th Street or something, ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
Crazy. With a metal bat. All right. That would have been insane.
Think about it.
So the Sooners are 35-20. They don't look all that intimidating at first glance, especially for Nebraska when you consider that Nebraska goes into this regional having wins against number 1 overall seed Vanderbilt. Huskers twice beat the number 8 seed Oregon State in the regular season. And then Nebraska beat Oregon and UCLA, the 12 and 15 seeds respectively, en route to the Big Ten tournament championship in Omaha over the past few days. But if you look closer at Oklahoma, it has a junior on the mound named Kyson Witherspoon as the ace of its staff. He's 10-3 in the SEC with a whip. That's a pitching stat, walks plus hits divided by innings pitched. It's under 1. That's good. ERA of 2.47, 120 strikeouts and 20 walks in 91.1 innings. So he's averaging about 1.3 Ks per inning. First team all SEC. So for Nebraska, after it had to beat Joseph Jerwa, the Big Ten pitcher of the year, just to be able to play the next 3 games in the Big Ten tournament with some meaning, here comes Kyson Witherspoon.
Yeah.
Certain to pitch against the Huskers on Friday at 4 p.m. in Chapel Hill. Projected first-round pick in the opening round of regional play.
Well, and they beat the lefty from Oregon too, who was one of the best guys in the conference. Yeah. Yes. So I don't know. Like we said it before the Big Ten tournament, and I'll say it here again. Like I can't tell you that Nebraska doesn't have a chance at this, right? They tend to play their best against the best. It obviously looks like a really tough matchup. And it will be. It'll be tooth and nail to get it done against a team like Oklahoma. And then obviously, North Carolina, we haven't, they as the 1 seed playing the 4 seed in their first game have a very advantageous situation, and they have a great frontline starter as well. So you're going to have to probably go through in the best case scenario, 2 dudes who are like borderline All-Americans in your first 2 games if you want to be the 2-0 team in the bracket, which history would suggest that the 2-0 team is in very, very good shape to get out of it.
I don't know if Nebraska would see Carolina's ace. They could throw him against Holy Cross, and they have multiple aces if you look at their pitching numbers. But the guy who's at the top is Jake Knapp.
Yeah,
he's 12 and
he's like the pitcher of the year. Like I mean, and I would guess that North Carolina would throw off in the first game. I would guess. So
they don't need Jake Knapp to beat Holy Cross.
Correct.
Most likely. So he's 12-0. He's also 6'5", 270. I want to see this guy. If Nebraska can't make it to the College World Series, I want to see this guy at the College World Series. 24 years old. So he was injured last year and didn't pitch. So this is basically like, this is the guy you go down to Warner Park and see for a AAA game. Like he's pitching for like Salt Lake or St. Paul or something in the International League. But
and then they made the College World Series last year, and their starter in the first game in the College World Series was Jason DeCaro, who is their second guy, and he throws gas. I mean, so like it's just you're not going to. There's no more days off in terms of pitching. You're going to see the best guys from the SEC and the ACC, and so Nebraska obviously doesn't match up from a pitching perspective, but can they just, can they just scratch one out? Right? It's postseason baseball. You never know exactly what you're going to get, and so if you could scratch one out to start, you roll it into game 2 and you see what happens.
They're confident. Heard some comments from some of the Huskers after Sunday's win, and then also on Monday in Lincoln. Let's come back and talk a little bit about that and what kind of a chance Nebraska has, and we'll finish the show with some more football talk after this on the Locked On Nebraska podcast.
All right, welcome back. Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman with you. We should be for a programming note, we should be on schedule for the rest of the week here. Regular. Sorry, we got a little wonky on you last week, but we should be.
We're gonna make it work. We got travel plans current and ahead. I'm gonna be out of pocket for next week, but we'll figure out a way to do some shows. Connor is headed to lovely Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I am excited to be in a regional. That would not have been my although I will say baseball is done right in Fayetteville, Arkansas, as I've said before. So like it's obviously very, very exciting. But I was sort of looking forward to getting out a little bit. And actually the place that I wanted to go and be stationed for the next 4 or 5 days was the place that Nebraska got. So they'll enjoy that a lot. But I'll be taking the old bus down to Fayetteville.
You'll be with the Jays. Got to take a bus. Have you been to Fayetteville for postseason baseball?
Yeah,
I went. You did.
I went and covered Nebraska in 2021. So I mean, that was
okay.
Awesome.
You were there for the Arkansas fans in left field tormenting Mojo Hagee and that whole thing.
Yeah, Creighton has a player. We've already discussed this on the previous trip. Talking about talking about places where they might end up for a regional. We've discussed Creighton closer Garrett Langrel on the show before.
I've seen him in the hair.
Yeah, he's been thumbs down in people.
He did that to Will Bolt, didn't he? Yeah.
People in Arkansas are going to very much enjoy Garrett Langrel.
All right.
Yeah. We'll see how that one goes.
Yeah, say hi to Dave Van Horn if you get the chance. Pull him aside. It freaks me out that he's 64 years old. Like I am not happy about that. That Dave Van Horn is 64 years old. All I see is like 37-year-old Dave Van Horn like getting ready to go at Buck Belzer Field, and we're gonna take this thing and we're gonna get it to Omaha. Like I'm sorry, he's not 64 years old, but that's what the internet tells me. He is without a national championship, has been to Omaha 9 times.
It's amazing. So there's some pressure, like and because of that, Arkansas has kind of like, I don't know, they've the postseason has not been their friend, especially after the foul ball landed in foul territory, in Omaha a few years ago. So like
that was 2018. Yeah.
There's some pressure burning on them here.
Yeah, Arkansas was one pitch, one catch, one squeezed glove, kind of like Michigan State last Tuesday night, away from winning the national championship, beating or sweeping Oregon State in 2018. And since then, I don't want to say that they're cursed, but they've been back to Omaha a couple of times, had a 1-2 finish, had a 3-win performance in Omaha. So it's not like futility since then, but Arkansas has been to the College World Series 11 times without a championship. I looked this up yesterday. There's Florida State that sits way at the top, 19 trips to Omaha without a championship. And then you have this group in the 11 and 12 range. And one of them is North Carolina. So North Carolina has been to the College World Series 12 times without a national championship. So that, of course, is where Nebraska's headed. And the Tar Heels heavy favorite at home this weekend with Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Holy Cross in town. They were part of that all SEC, all ACC CWS a year ago. Remember, 4 teams from each conference. The Heels went 1-2. That was their first trip since 2018. So they had been very good, very consistent up until that time. Made it seven times in a 13-year stretch before 2018, and then had a drought that came to an end last year. So they're an interesting story in their own right as they bid here as the number 5 seed overall in the tournament to make it back and win in Omaha. I picked Arkansas. I did in our little sampling of storylines that came out yesterday on The Athletic. I took Arkansas. Arkansas has a player who is from Hawaii and is the SEC Player of the Year. Their shortstop has an OPS of over 1,100. So you will get to see him this weekend in Fayetteville.
They also have local product Cam Kojal, who's
second team All SEC. Yes,
not bad.
Yes.
Right in the middle of that
this is the Millard South. This is a Millard South grad who, am I right? Or yes, Millard South. Gosh, I was confusing Cam Kojal and Tyson Lewis last week. This is me being old. In an interview, in a radio interview. It might have been. It was with your fill-in, Michael Severe. Severe talked to me on Wednesday on your show while you were at the lovely Big East tournament. And man, it was like, all right, Mitch, we're going to ask you 400 questions in like a 4-minute span and try to test your knowledge on like every subject possible. It was like a brain quiz. And he got me finally, and this is my own fault because I was trying to recall all these names. He got me finally when we were talking about baseball, and I couldn't remember the name of Tyson Lewis, the Millard West grad from a year ago, who was a high pick in the MLB draft and ended up signing. He was, he signed with Arkansas. Yeah, he was an Arkansas signee and did not attend Arkansas. But Kojal is the Millard South grad who went to Vanderbilt and then transferred to Arkansas this year and has had an outstanding season.
Yeah. Back to Nebraska real quick here before we finish this thing out. So Will Bolt has now out of nowhere back-to-back trips to a regional. And I think that in itself is, I mean, think about how the conversation has changed for Nebraska baseball over the last week. One missed catch by the Michigan State right fielder really changes the outlook of things. So there's
not just the season, but on like Will Bolt's tenure.
Yeah. I mean, there's going to be
he's been to back-to-back regionals.
Yeah, there is going to be some conversation in this offseason about what they needed to do next year and the things that they needed to do in the offseason. But that is kind of gone now, right?
It should probably still happen. Like, just because you made a great run in Omaha and did it for a second consecutive year, it doesn't change the fact that there was a lot of disappointment in the first half of the season, and there's probably some things that need to be addressed with the hitting approach and some offensive stuff for Nebraska. That's what I hope doesn't happen, is that they, let's say they go 2-2 at regionals and come back and it's like, all right, we had a successful year, made it back to the NCAA tournament 2 consecutive years, something to build off. It's like, no, you were ranked in the preseason, and yeah, you lost your ace pitcher, but like, address the things that needed to be addressed before you got to the Big Ten tournament. Like, and then, you can be even better in 2026 than you might have been. Don't let this like lull you into thinking that everything went great for Nebraska baseball this year.
Right. So the question at the end of the podcast is this: Can Nebraska get out? Can Nebraska miraculously make it out of this weekend and make it past the regional round for the first time since 2005?
Well, we're talking, this is like, can Nebraska ever win a national championship in football? Like,
okay, will.
No. I
don't see it.
Like, we talked about the road in front of them with the pitching matchups, potential pitching matchups, and no, they are not in good position to win the regional in Chapel Hill.
They are built, and I've said this before or something like it, like, they are built as a team who has the chance to be pretty competitive, like, as you go deeper into the regional, right? Like, as you go deeper and into game 6 and game 7, like, you have to be a regional finalist to get to this point, because it just feels like they're always counting outs and they're always trying to put things together on the mound. So like, there is that piece, but there's 2 really, really tough tests before you get to that point.
I think because their team makeup, because they don't have a superstar. They don't have Bryce Matthews or Max Anderson this year. There's not somebody in the lineup that they just rely on at all times.
Or Cade Povich or Spencer Schwellenbach, like,
right,
even on the mound.
Both on the mound and at the plate. Like, it's a 1 through 9 offensive approach. If you lose someone to injury, as happened to Nebraska with a couple players, even 3 when you throw in Ty Stone, their first baseman, who's been out for a couple of weeks, like 3 regulars in the starting lineup weren't playing at the end of the league tournament. And it was like Nebraska didn't really miss a beat, because that's just the kind of team, that's who they are. Like, for better or worse, that's kind of who they are offensively. And same thing on the mound after McConaughey went down. Mason McConaughey, the ace pitcher early in the season, they just became a team that said, everybody's got to do it. And those are teams that can make runs in regionals and can catch fire if you can get into like the second game of the elimination bracket, that kind of stuff. So We'll see. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Nebraska's season is going to end in Chapel Hill, and they're not going to get the chance to. We should mention the Chapel Hill Regional will play the winner of the Chapel Hill Regional will play the winner of the Eugene, Oregon Regional, which I thought Oregon got slighted in getting the 12. I thought Oregon would have been 8, the national seed. That went to Oregon State instead. So slap in the face there to the Big Ten and to Oregon, the Oregon Ducks. But if Oregon gets through at home, they're likely going to have to go to North Carolina or play Nebraska or Oklahoma.
One more quick note before we get out of here. Tonight at Werner Park is Jack Caglione's AAA home debut. He hit 4 home runs in 6 games last week in Salt Lake City for the Storm Chasers, and will now take his talents to the launch pad that is Werner Park. So I'll see everybody out there if you're able to go.
I won't be there, but I'm going to be there this afternoon, earlier in the afternoon, to talk to one Jack Caglione.
Yeah.
And we'll see where that goes. Maybe a story coming up on The Athletic from me about the future Kansas City Royal.
Excellent. All right. That's it for us today. We want to remind you before we go, thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen today and every day, and that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today, here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app.